What Levin means, and does not mean, by mind outside the brain. Michael Levin, what he actually discovered. You gave a compact set of prompts, Michael Levin, professor of biology at the University of Tavets / what governs the body if not the brain, / the quantum body, mind outside the brain / you are not just a body. You are a field of decision / what did he actually discover? Below I turn that into a careful, long-form explanation that sticks to what Levin and his lab have actually shown, and separates what is well-supported, bioelectric patterning, cellular decision-making, mind as a distributed control process, from claims that go beyond the evidence, for example, invoking quantum processes as the explanation. Who is Michael Levin and what does his lab study? Michael Levin is a developmental and synthetic biologist, Vannevar Bush professor at Tufts, whose lab studies the physical and informational processes that make bodies form, maintain, and repair their shapes. His group integrates developmental biology, bioelectricity, computation and synthetic biology approaches to understand how many cells coordinate to produce coherent anatomy and behavior, and how we might reprogram those processes to heal, regenerate, or create novel living systems. Tufts University +1. The big idea: bodies are information processing systems, not just bags of cells. A central theme in Levin's work is to treat tissues and cell collectives as systems that compute. Cells do not only follow chemical gradients or gene expression programs in isolation, they also exchange electrical signals, membrane voltage, ion flows, chemical signals, and mechanical cues. These signals form spatial and temporal patterns that encode the target morphology, i.e., the shape the tissue is trying to achieve and maintain. Changing those electrical patterns can change what the cells build. In that sense, the body contains distributed control information beyond any single brain or genome. allencenter.tufts.edu +1. What Levin actually discovered, summary of core results. 1. Bioelectric patterning guides growth and form. Levin's lab has shown that resting membrane potentials and ion channel-mediated bioelectric signals across non-neural cells act as a communication medium that directs cell proliferation, differentiation, and spatial patterning. Manipulating those bioelectric patterns can alter anatomical outcomes, for instance, producing extra eyes in new locations, changing left-to-right asymmetry, or directing cells to regenerate different structures. This is not mystical, it's an experimentally demonstrated control layer on top of genetics. Wikipedia +1. 2. Memory and decision-making can be stored outside the brain. Levin's experiments with planaria and other regenerating animals indicate that aspects of memory and pattern information are stored in somatic tissues as stable bioelectric or biochemical states. For example, after certain manipulations, flatworms can regenerate heads with altered anatomy, and some of these altered body pattern states persist across regenerations, suggesting the pattern goal is embodied in tissue-level states, not only in a brain. This supports the view that information and some forms of memory are distributed in the body. Consciocentric.com +1. 3. Cells and tissues can implement goal-directed, problem-solving behavior. By framing cells as agents in a collective control system, Levin's group has documented cases where cell groups adaptively coordinate to achieve a target morphology or to repair damage, a form of rudimentary problem-solving. The lab has used computational models and experimental perturbations to show how these collective dynamics produce robust shape outcomes. PMC +1. 4. Xenobots and synthetic morphogenesis show plasticity and programmable living systems. Levin co-directed the work that produced xenobots, small, millimeter-scale machines built solely from frog, Xenopus, cells whose shapes and behaviors were designed, in silico, and then realized by assembling living cells. Xenobots can move, repair themselves, and perform useful microscale tasks, demonstrating that body plans and behaviors can be engineered by manipulating cellular collectives and their communication channels. Xenobots are a proof of principle for reprogramming morphology via non-genetic means. Tufts Now +1. Levin and collaborators sometimes use provocative language, cognition, decision-making, collective intelligence, or the tame, technological approach to mind everywhere framework, to argue that many biological systems besides brains exhibit information processing capacities relevant to what we call intelligence. Crucially, supported claim, non-neural tissues implement information storage and computation via bioelectric, chemical, and mechanical signals that can be described as goal-directed control. These systems can decide among developmental outcomes, remember pattern states, and adapt to perturbations. That is a literal, experimentally grounded sense of mind as distributed control. PMC +1. Not supported by Levin's published experimental work that claim that quantum effects are the primary explanation for this distributed mind. Levin's research focuses on bioelectric fields, ion channels, gene regulation and multicellular dynamics, classical biological and biophysical mechanisms, rather than quantum coherence or quantum information processing as required to explain macro-scale bodily decision-making. If you see phrases like quantum body used in popular writing or speculative takes, treat them separately from Levin's experimental body of work. Levin's contributions can make it tempting to use metaphors like field or mind everywhere, but the mechanistic evidence he provides centers on bioelectricity and cellular signaling. Lifespan.io +1. Why this matters, implications. Medicine and regenerative therapies. If we can read and rewrite the bioelectric codes that specify organ shape and size, we could steer regeneration and repair in ways that gene editing alone cannot, for example, coaxing tissue to rebuild a limb or correcting congenital patterning defects. The New Yorker. Philosophy of Mind and Ethics. The empirical finding that memory-like states and decision-making can be embodied in non-neural tissues complicates sharp brain-centric views of cognition and may demand new ethical thinking about engineered living systems. PMC. Synthetic Biology and Design. Xenobots and similar engineered collectives point to a future where living systems can be designed from the bottom up to perform tasks, with both exciting applications and important safety/ethics questions. Tufts Now. Short answer to your phrasing. What governs the body if not the brain? Parts of the body are governed by distributed bioelectric and chemical control systems. Tissues maintain pattern information and direct growth. The brain governs behavior and neural computation, but it is not the only place where biological computation or memory resides. allencenter.tufts.edu +1. The quantum body, mind outside the brain. Levin's work supports the idea of a mind that is broader than neurons, a mind as distributed control, but he does not ground this program primarily in quantum mechanisms. The mechanisms he demonstrates are bioelectric and biochemical, experimentally accessible, classical biophysics. If you want to invoke quantum physics, that is a speculative layer not required by Levin's core experimental results. Wikipedia +1. You are not just a body. You are a field of decisions. That is a useful, poetic summary of Levin's perspective. Bodies embody control systems that store goals and make decisions at the tissue level. It's metaphorically and experimentally supported, as long as you understand field to mean patterns of bioelectric and biochemical state, not a mystical quantum field. allencenter.tufts.edu. Further reading, to dig deeper. Levin Lab, Tufts, Lab Pages and Resources. Dr. Michael Levin. Technological approach to mind everywhere, TAME, Levin's conceptual framework for comparing cognition across systems. PMC. Tufts and press pieces on xenobots and regenerative experiments, describe experiments and potential. Tufts now +1. Final, concise takeaway. Michael Levin discovered and is systematically developing the idea that multicellular tissues use bioelectric and other non-genetic signaling to encode goal states for anatomy and behavior. These signaling networks can store information, implement decision-making, and be reprogrammed, which makes bodies much more like distributed computers, or fields of decisions, than collections of passive cells. That insight is revolutionary for developmental biology and regenerative medicine, but it is grounded in bioelectric and cellular mechanisms, not a demonstrated quantum mind. If you'd like, I can expand any of the experimental examples, planarian memory experiments, Xenopus/Xenobot protocols, specific ion channel manipulations, with citations and accessible descriptions. Turn this into a long-form article or lecture script in the style you prefer, or make a short, punchy summary for social media.